Gavel?
So you, Michelle, you know Bruce, wrestling is coming? Or you don't know? I'll move over here if he comes, I'll move back.
So this is the Plymouth Charter Commission meeting in the Great Hall on August 5th. We have a fairly active agenda. I want to say at the outset, we are all masked, so I ask anybody who speaks to speak distinctly and slowly and loudly so that we can hear you through the masks. So I'd like to start the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with justice for all.
So thank you for those that are here tonight in person. This is a hybrid meeting. It is being recorded. It'll be here in person as well as via a Zoom webinar, and it can be viewed live on your local TV, government PAC TV channel. The Zoom attendees tonight must register using the Zoom webinar link on the Charter Commission page of the town website. And any Zoom attendees, members of the public, if they wish to speak, should be on Zoom, registered, and please use the raise hand icon on the lower portion of your screen. So we have both an in-person audience tonight for public comment. They can use the podium here, or they can join us over Zoom. So we have a first item on the agenda. We will have three speakers who will talk to issues that this commission is going to deal with in our work, and we'll also ask them questions. And I suspect this should take about somewhere between an hour and a half. Then we'll have public comment, and then we will move to discussion of various items that are on our agenda. So without further introduction, I would like to welcome our first speaker here tonight, which is member of the Select Board, Patrick Flaherty. And those of you that watched the Select Board a couple of weeks ago saw Patrick with an exciting new initiative that he presented to the Select Board and had a very favorable response. And he's put this together, and it's quite exciting because some of his materials may be very appropriate to put in a charter when we put it together. So Patrick, welcome to our meeting. And
Thank you.
Climate, Energy, and Environment Initiative. First, we can see if we can hear you. Go ahead.
No, I just said thank you for inviting me here, and I'm happy to share that process or answer questions. And I just appreciate the interest that individual commission members have shown, and everyone in this effort. It's a lot of different groups that went into that outcome from a few weeks ago that worked on this. So I'm happy to share. So. I guess I just would want to know kind of if the general background of that effort or kind of the next steps, or where would it be best for me to start on this one for the purposes of this meeting?
So Patrick, why don't you maybe give us an outline of your initiative for, I would say, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Some of us then would have questions, and we can develop some of the ideas that you've presented. So the floor is yours.
All right, sure. So the initiative was about started in January this year, and the idea was to take a inventory and a process of what are all the efforts that relate to the climate, energy, and environmental either initiatives or plans or things that have already been done by the town, and I kind of get them all in one place. And from there, what we did is, I know from talking with many different groups in the community, there's I'm sorry, it's I see two of me on the screen here. I'm just gonna make it so I can kind of talk and not see a bunch of me in stereo here. I don't know if that's gonna do that. Anyway, I'll just talk to myself here, I guess. But the purpose of that effort, the Climate, Energy, and Environmental Task Force, was to pull together the town and all the different efforts that are happening in the community to see where the town fits in either it be an individual project, a policy initiative, or just future planning efforts. And for the town to provide a response to that. It didn't mean necessarily that whatever was going to come forward or whatever was the priority of this group would be a guarantee that the town would say, yes, we're going to do that tomorrow. But it was more of trying to engage all the different groups in the community alongside all the various different efforts that are happening at the town in different departments that at times can be a little bit siloed. And so you had duplication of efforts at times from community groups, even sometimes in the town itself. And the idea of this was to make one hub, one center of information, so that you could look at what are the priorities of the town, what will it take to move certain initiatives or ideas forward, what are the roadblocks in the way, and at the same time, the groups in the community that are really subject matter experts and have a lot of value to add for areas the town could be working on, what is their input? What are their ideas of other towns and all the backgrounds of folks who have been working on this? And through this process, over the course of 4 months, there were 4 different items that really rose to the top, far and above. There was several dozen submissions of, hey, we should look at this, or let's have a conversation about this policy or this item or this type of thing. And what it came down to was that these 4 were the town declaring a climate emergency through the emergency declaration, the need to ensure that open space is an ongoing priority for the town, and the third one was the position within the town to coordinate these efforts and kind of continue the accountability to the process and all the goals that the town is setting. And then finally, there was one that had to do with the MVP grant that is with our neighboring towns on the coast, Duxbury and Kingston. And when it comes back up for submission, the next round of the MVP, that we would be a co-applicant and offer some of our resources to provide support for that grant. And so I was very happy that there was unanimous support for these 4 items on July 20th. And it was really a testament to show that the process of bringing all the information together and, working through, there were some ideas that were like, maybe that's something that we look at after we get through sort of the first pass here and come back to and really explore and see what it would take to have the town get involved in, more specific, granular, individual efforts. And those, I think that they're coming back, and we're having more conversations about those individual projects and items. But we know that it's not like flipping a switch and overnight you can have a whole initiative bottled up and ready to go. There's a lot of work that goes into the who's going to do it, where's the money going to come from, what makes sure that this is just a policy that doesn't just get lost, from season to season, and sort of ensuring that there's a longevity to this effort is really centered around this position that's going to come in through the Springtown meeting process and trying to set that up to be successful. So that's kind of the last 5 or 6 months, how we got here. Those 4 items were the end result of that first process. And, happy to talk more about the process or, kind of some of the learnings through that, or just kind of maybe pause here to answer any questions about how we got here.
Thank you. We would like to ask you some questions at this point. Any questions to my right? Betsy Hall.
Yes, Patrick, I'm really grateful that you and all of the other people who are involved are doing this initiative. Could you say what are the symptoms of climate change in Plymouth right now that create this emergency? What's happening in Plymouth today that tells us we need to address this now? Please.
So there's a number, and one of the things that I learned through the process is that you ask some questions about, what has been done or what has been looked at in, you would call it town infrastructure on the coastline, and how we might, like, let's take one very specific example. There's the pump station on Water Street. I say, well, what would happen if, there's a flood? And then, oh, well, there was a study and a consultant that came in and gave us a recommendation on that. It's like, where is that? Where does that live? Let's pull that up. Let's bring it forward. And that's more me learning through the process what's out there. That's not saying that no one in all of town knew where that one consultant document was. But what I learned was when you look at things like our coastal infrastructure as a town, you look at some of our residents that are on live. One example is in Manamet, where we have folks that are, in the sand, and there's, whether we think it's for one reason or another, rising sea levels is happening. So give it 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. This is something that the town is going to have to deal with one way or the other. Storms that have different areas of town. I don't want to, kind of pick on any one place or another, but there's been town infrastructure that has to get rebuilt at a very, very high cost. So if year after year, say there's an area that gets destroyed, how is the town going to address that for the long term? Is it towns like Falmouth have shown that they're already dealing with things like this, like managed retreat from areas. That's not the term. Couldn't find the term that we're supposed to use for that now, but the concept is, how do we approach this for the long term? And it's not like it's unique to Plymouth, but all of these things that have to do with sea level rise and just the threat to our infrastructure and to our residents is very real. And it's, thousands and thousands of scientists have pointed to this sea level rise. And no matter how anyone wants to say, like, for one reason or another, well, it's the ice age happened and then the sea levels rise and they fall, or it's, man-made, which I believe the science that it is a man-made acceleration of this, what's going on. However we get there, this is an issue that's going to be front and center with our town. In addition to the other pieces that are our aquifer, the overall what we contribute as a town to the issue as a whole. And there's numerous documents that kind of pulled not just the anecdotal stories of this, but actual hard recommendations like this. This one I recommend to, that's the open space addendum. Here we go. The Climate Ready Healthy Plymouth document, which is just absolutely loaded with information on this very topic. I'd recommend to look at that. I'm pretty sure that that's something that I know you have as well, Betsy, but others, I really recommend looking at this document if you haven't. It outlines a lot of these things.
More questions?
Thank you.
Bill, go ahead.
Patrick, thank you for compiling this effort and making it a priority with the town, because I do think we have to adopt language in our charter, and I think that's what you're looking for, that touches on the importance of preservation in these attributes of our town as it starts to prioritize the results of climate change and sea level rises. We are a town that is on the coast, and we are encountering added costs as a municipalities managing these elements. Yes, I've heard of different versions, managed retreat, strategic retreat, but I guess they want to hang in there with either migration or resilience with language. But I try to, when I put the language out there, I'm trying to communicate with people and trying to be straightforward. But I do think that that as we look at our charter, we should be looking at an opportunity to add language to the importance of what we're outlining. Lee Hartman's here tonight, and we're probably going to hear about some of the attributes in our charter relevant to planning, because that's where how we use our land really impacts the environment. So that's a great concern that I have too, that we adopt language in our charter that if we're going to talk the talk, we need to walk the walk. And the walk is to actually look at some of our zoning bylaws and seeing how they can accommodate a balance between building a sustainable local economy that helping our town, but at the same time dealing with these elements that are happening within our community as a result of how we use our land. So it's I look forward to finding opportunities where we can adopt some of that into our charter. Thank you.
Now, Patrick, I had a few specific questions. And having read the materials, and they're brief, but maybe I can hit at each one of them. The first question I have is, of these 4 items, I know there'll be money needs to be spent to hire the planner, the coordinator and planner, but these other items, how will they be funded if Plymouth is going to participate in the other 3 initiatives? Is each one going to be a separate budget item, an article?
Yeah, I can speak to those 3 items. There's some that are non-monetary, like the participation of the town as a co-applicant in that MVP grant, which is a regional grant. It's more of a dedication of some town resource, staff time to provide data or follow-up. And so while there is a cost to that, it's not necessarily something that needs to be funded from town meeting. And, again, it's where we are not the lead on that grant. We don't have to do the typical grant, very robust management of the reporting and all that type of thing. It's more of the helping to support the data, support the information from that side, from our town. The first item that had to do with the overall declaration of a climate emergency. This is, again, a really critical item. At the surface, it's not a monetary direct cost, but rather the importance there is that it's providing a lens that we look through policy as we go forward. And I think it is, it's a little bit more than something that's purely ceremonial, because what this is going to do is going to try and, when we have certain policies that come forward that do have a cost, or initiatives that do have a cost, it's showing that there is this support, from the select board and from many other people in the community that have contributed to this, that there is a support for additional costs to fulfill some of the needs here, like the position. In that position, it speaks to, one of the things that's going through right now is that there's 17 towns that were identified, and there could be more just in Massachusetts, where I'm working with some others on looking at how that specific role that's similar to the one that we are proposing in Plymouth has had success or not success. And one of the items that is clearly a win for many of these towns is that the ability for this person to generate grant funding has been, there's a couple of examples where it's just been a wild success. And I think the piece, and this is where I wanted to kind of get into and just throw some things out there, what I've learned through the process of coming in, not really having just listening to dozens and dozens of people who shared some of like things that worked, things that didn't work, and ideas, is that this concept of how grants are approached is just absolutely critical. How we exchange data as a town amongst different efforts, and how that's organized. I think it's an opportunity to have this position, if it lands in a place where it can be successful, to be kind of the hub of a lot of this information for grants that are applicable in this, climate, environment, and energy, topics. I'm not talking about like public safety grants or things like that. The subject matter experts for those would, obviously in those departments, but the answering that question, which I don't have a perfect answer, but how the town will as a whole within the structure of the town, as we go forward in the future, approach grants. I know this is a topic that's come up with my colleagues on the select board and many people of, is it a grant department? Is it a grant writer? Is it, this is a piece of the puzzle with this position that certainly grants will be a part of that job description. But I think the funding, which is the really long-winded way of getting back to your original question, the funding for some of these major efforts is going to come from grants. There's a lot of funding out there at the state and federal level to take on some of these initiatives and we've shown to be very successful at different times in getting grants to do major projects, but there's not an extra $1, $2, $5, $10 million in the budget for anything. So it just shows that as critical as initiatives that we have for just the safety of our town as we go forward, and how we need to mitigate some of the risks that have to do with climate change and being in coastal community, it's so related to our ability to get funding to properly prepare and either plan for or mitigate some of the risks. So getting this grant piece right and getting it set up for success is just absolutely vital. And that's why I think there was a sort of like there was an effort to say, let's get this position here as soon as we can. Let's get it out there for fall town meeting. It's like, well, I understand the eagerness to want to put this forward in quickly, but also getting this right so that it's set up to be successful, from not only being able to communicate amongst the rest of the structure of the town, but also understanding in the bigger picture that grants is going to be a major focus of this position to help pay for all the future items, is kind of worth the wait and worth the exploring with the other towns, sort of in a way that's your commission's doing right now, and exploring with other towns, seeing it works, hasn't worked. There's great examples and templates out there that we can look at and to sort of pull together and augment the efforts that the departments and individual staff members are doing now and have been very successful at doing in as a town. And that's, all over the website of the town, and some of the successes that have been there for grants. And when I say that, as we kind of pull it together, it's just going to become even more important as we go forward and the problems get bigger. So probably longer answer than I wanted, but you got me going on that. So.
Patrick, I was intrigued with your reference to regional in several places here in the initiatives, and you mentioned Duxbury and Kingston. Are there other towns involved in this effort? And if so, what are they? And what's going on in these other towns this is happening in Plymouth, but is Duxbury and Kingston likewise moving forward and hiring a coordinator for their town to work with Plymouth? I mean, what's happening on the regional front?
So the Duxbury Plymouth reference is a specific grant that was through the MVP process because we share that same coastline. So it's far more towns than just Duxbury and Kingston that are having a focus on this area. But I just pulled up this work in progress spreadsheet. There's the 17 towns that already have this position in place, and they are not all coastal communities, which is interesting. So there's, I won't go off and list them all, but there's a concerted effort. Plus, you look at things like the green communities designation, which is in this whole arena of the same type of effort. We're late to the game to get this in Massachusetts as a town. So this has been made a priority for, oh my gosh, I've heard the number so many times, but it's well over half, in the 200 number is coming to mind, but of towns that have already achieved that designation that we are looking to get completed shortly. But there's been some roadblocks to that getting done, and I think we're looking to try and make the process of that as efficient as we can. But the point is that all of our neighboring communities have, in one way or another, this type of effort going on. Falmouth is a example where they have seen sort of the effects of this happen. It's been front and center in front of them because they've had to deal with it in different ways. So they have some interesting policies and approaches to this that's they're dealing with right now. It's a good example.
Patrick, do you see a need for institutionalizing the process? In other words, should there be a mention, should there be a paragraph, should there be a whole section of the charter that mandates that the town perform certain acts?
I don't know. I mean, I'll hold off on just giving like a gut reaction answer because I see this as so important to the town. Whether that belongs as we have the departments mapped out there. I don't know the answer. My feeling is that however we can make this a priority and not something that is seasonal, or if the people change, that an effort might go away, is a good thing. So whether that's memorialized with goals of the town or job descriptions or even the charter, I'd be in support of all that. Whether it's appropriate to be there or not, that's a different question I can't answer. But however we can memorialize the importance and these efforts, knowing that things might change in the future in terms of what's available for, all the things that we know, how you can't future-proof everything that's in writing, but I would support however we can memorialize the importance of these efforts for our community.
Patrick, you mentioned Falmouth, and Falmouth is one of the charters that we're looking at closely here to see if there are any interesting pieces of their charter that are exciting or make sense to consider seriously. And also, I think you mentioned to me Amherst at one point had done a lot in this area, and these are charters that we're going to be examining. Do you have any idea if they've done it in those particular towns, or how are they implementing these policies, which you, I think, have said are quite impressive?
So I don't know much about Amherst at the granular level. I mean, Falmouth, it's our neighbor here. So just the one example that comes to mind with Falmouth is that they're dealing with the migration issue of how to handle infrastructure that may not be there or have to be repaired year after year after year. They have a process in place. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert of the Falmouth process, but they are dealing with this very actively. And it's on a website, it explains what they're doing in terms of their process and how they've set that up to deal with this. Very public is engaged with the conversations as well, which in my conversations with some of the folks there was just a critical importance because it's really big time heavy stuff they're talking about. There was one article of someone, not to get into individual stories, but like you buy a piece of property and then you find out that they might not rebuild the road 5 years from now if it goes away in a storm. Well, how do you handle that? I mean, I think the bigger picture that I am trying to always keep in mind is what can we put in as a policy or how we're going to respond to certain things that we know are likely to happen at some given future point before it happens, in anticipating really, really difficult, tough decisions once it's before us. And it's some real hard, heavy stuff that sometimes it's easier to map that out and make policies and make really thoughtful, educated decisions about before you're in the middle of the crisis. That's a piece of this too that will involve not only just one position, but it's very broad town policies. And I think Falmouth is a good example who's jumped out in front of doing some of that and made some really heavy decisions about how they're going to approach certain things that's going to be knocking on our doorstep as well.
Patrick, as you outlined some of these, some of the work that you've done so far in terms of researching and compiling this, there's a new report that just came out the last couple of days from the trustees of reservation. They just put out a report on southeastern Massachusetts, the Cape and the islands, and some of the cautionary notes that they have and options for municipalities to respond to what you're saying. So a lot of what you've just outlined tonight, and a lot of us that have worked on for a number of years are now compiling into information that's readily available, where there may be something there that could be adopted in terms of language, in terms of priorities within our charter that we do systematically. We have language in our charter asking that the town do certain things at certain point in time. And revisiting this question could be an act of, determining as a community that we feel this is important, that we review the process of evaluating the circumstance we're in at a certain point in time, not leave it up to the pleasure of any committee or board, but put it into the charter so that there's an automatic review of these conditions.
Patrick, if I could ask you a question on a couple of your items here. What's the difference between the climate resilience area and the coastal resilience? I mean, is this the same thing, and what's the distinction?
Can you be a little more specific? Sorry, climate, I'm not sure which items you mean.
Climate resilience coordinator, and then you're talking about a regional coastal resilience grant. Is this resilience used in the same context? I mean, it's just resilience?
I understand now. So the Regional Coastal Resiliency Grant, that is the title of the MVP grant that is involved with Kingston and Duxbury. And the Climate Resiliency Sustainability Planner position, that is separate, but same terminology there. So one's a grant and the other is the description of that position. And that's a little bit of a working title right now, that Climate Resiliency Sustainability Planner. That's one of the things that is being looked at, like what are other towns calling this position? Because we know there's 351 municipalities in Massachusetts, and this is going to be a position that could likely attract some extremely qualified candidates. It's a progressive position. It's not like there's hundreds of them. We're a very large, the largest land area we all know, town on the coast with so many natural resources. I have really high hopes that when we advertise and put this out there in a thoughtful way, that we're going to get some very qualified, excited individual people to take interest. And I think that's another reason why it makes sense to work towards getting this structured and set up to be successful, to show to whoever might be wanting to maybe leave another position and take this on, a very clear outline of what are the goals, where do they fit in here, and be able to really take this on as with some passion. That's the I think the opportunity we have with this position here.
I think the resilience for Plymouth is an absolutely crucial item. I mean, Plymouth is in so many respects unique, and I would hope that we would be looking at the cutting edge science on resilience and the purpose of Plymouth Long Beach as a barrier, and that not necessarily is the armoring of the beach the best thing to do, just to keep building seawalls and trying to keep the ocean off, but use the beach as natural growth and resources. Now, let me just say to finish this point, that if anybody would take a picture or photograph of Plymouth Long Beach 25 years ago, 20 years ago, when it was absolutely covered with people and cars, and the dunes were 2 or 3 feet. If you go out there now, you will see dunes up and down that beach that are 20, 30, 40 feet high. And they are the barrier that is protecting Plymouth Harbor. So this whole idea of resilience is so important if we look at it in the latest, cutting edge science, and not fall into the folly of, spending millions of dollars trying to rebuild walls, which never work in the long run. I had a couple specific questions on the open space. You say 30% is our goal, and I believe we're at 22% now, so you're saying we should go to 30%.
There
What
was-
about
so it-
40%? Would 40% be a good objective?
The process that we went through with the task force to arrive at the 4 items involved submissions from the community. And there was a submission from the community that talked about a specific percentage goal of open space. And the item that was brought forward that was voted on was not necessarily saying that here's a specific percentage that we are targeting, but rather what's our approach and what are the vehicles that we're going to look at to achieve more open space, or certainly not lose the open space that we have. So things like the CPC through the Community Preservation Act and how those funds are, that we're giving a recommitment to that funding mechanism, which a portion of goes to open space. There's other ideas that I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation on, that not to get into like the individual, because I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on all the proposals, but there's other ideas to fund and or create policy to improve the open space that we have or add more to it. That was the intent of that second item, which was, if you looked at all the people who submitted responses, it was in the most number of individual people's responses, like 87%, I believe, of everyone who responded had that as one of their top priorities. So this is definitely a priority for those who have been involved in the process. And a specific goal percentage, I think, can be a little tricky, because that's for like the next level of depth in this conversation. But just to clear up, what was voted on July 20th was the recommitment to the CPA via the CPC, and a commitment to, in this calendar year, bring back to open session a discussion about additional policies and ideas to continue that open space work.
Any questions? Well, thank you very much, Patrick. It's
I was looking
Betsy,
at
do you have
something. I was looking at the number of square miles. I had written down here somewhere the number of square miles in Plymouth. Sorry, I believe it's like 134 square miles in Plymouth, or is it 72 square miles? I'm sorry, I was just trying to find it on here.
124.
How much is it?
124?
124 square miles.
Well, that's, we go to 103 square miles.
100 what? 3?
103, I think, is the best number. The 24 one includes some of the water bodies in the bay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The reason I mention that is because then we would be talking 30% of that square miles. Right now, I think that the number of acres in open space that is owned and protected and controlled by the town of Plymouth, nobody else, just the town of Plymouth, I think that number is something that may not be as high as 22%. And I think that's the number that we need to talk about, is what acres does the town of Plymouth control? Because we don't control the state or the county or federal government. We don't control any of the Wildlands Trust, Audubon properties, Nature Conservancy. So I would love to know that number exactly, and I would like that number to be the number that we are talking 30%, would be the land we control, because we don't know, we can't control the state, for example. So I would love to have that number. How many acres does this particular town have in conservation that they have complete control over, that they own? So I would love to have that number, and I would like that 30% to represent that number, the land that we control.
So Betsy, you're touching on something that every open space committee has grappled with since it was formed in the 1990s, trying to get an account of what the town actually controls and what status it controls it in. So we know that land that is controlled by the town is held in different conditions. It's under the care and protection of fire, or police, or school, or the Board of Selectmen. Or it could be with Parks and Rec, and it could be in open space with a conservation restriction on it, which is the highest form of protection. There are other pieces of land that the town controls that could fall into another situation. But it's an exercise that the Open Space Committee has been working on at different times, but it's something that could be, the town is required to have an account of what land it owns and what status it holds the land in. We need to have a comprehensive, transparent account of what we have. And over the years, we've struggled to find what does the town control and what status is that land under. And it's something that Patrick Farrar is here tonight, too. He's done a lot of work on this question. I know the planning department and Lee here, and they've done a lot of work on this question over the years, trying to get an account of what the town controls.
Well, this says 30% of the land area of the town in conservation. It doesn't mention police, selectmen, firemen, school. It says 30% of the land area of the town in conservation. So that's what I would like to see.
Yeah.
I would like to see that 30% that Patrick has in this task force
So-
document.
Just to clarify, I want to just make sure, not sorry to interrupt, but it's an important clarification. There was a difference between the submissions from the community and what was voted on by the select board. And I just want to make that distinction, that the percentage was not a goal that was put into the July 20th select board meeting, but rather that was a part of one of the submissions that was the framework of how we moved forward with that item. Not sorry to interrupt, I just thought it was an important clarifications for where we are with that.
I was
Thank
just trying to look at it, Betsy, as an overall comprehensive, what is the town, not to single out any ownership. The town should know, because some of the land held by different departments is kind of archaic, and they shouldn't hold it, and it should be moved by town meeting, can move a piece of land from the care and protection of one to the other. We did a lot of that, moving things from tax title into open space and recreation, which automatically protects it. So I wanted to get a full account of everything the town owns, regardless of that. But then you can zero in on that eventually. So there could be some language that there's a required exercise every so many years where the town updates an account of what it holds in land, which would help people determine what to do with that land. Is it prime for conservation, or is it prime for some other use? So,
Patrick, what was you said there was a difference between what was proposed and what was voted. What was that difference regarding open space?
So there were dozens of submissions that came in about various topics. There were a number of them that came in regarding open space specifically. There's appendix in the materials that had all of the individual community submissions. So what was brought forward and voted on was a compiling of, what are the near-term goals? What is the town going to move forward with and take an action item on for the July 20th meeting? That was, I'll read you the motion just to clarify it. The motion that was approved on the 20th unanimously regarding open space was that the select board reaffirm the town of Plymouth's commitment to open space preservation with funding through the Community Preservation Act, and the continued work of the Community Preservation Committee and Open Space Committee. And this is the important and, that the select board will evaluate and publicly discuss additional opportunities and policies to increase open space in the current year, 2021. So that's the motion that was put forward, because there's, there needs to be the background work, the legwork, and all of the documentation in place, because you can anticipate all the questions that would come with a certain percentage of, like even clarifying the group point that Betsy is bringing up of what is the 30%? What is any percent? Is it of this? Is it of that? Does it include ponds? Does it include things? So I didn't see that percentage number as something that was ready to bring forward on July 20th, but we've made a commitment to come back and address this in a public session this year that may talk about a percentage, may talk about policy, may talk about funding mechanisms, but that's kind of the work that's now continuing on in this effort now to bring back to a new agenda item.
I have one more question.
Betsy?
One of the inputs you had from the community was to protect the aquifer, and that's something we hear about a lot. And I think all three selectmen candidates, when I read in the paper yesterday, their statements, talked about the environment and protecting our water. So I'm not seeing a lot of conservation education coming from any place in town right now in terms of water, constantly reminding people of ways that they can conserve and protect conserve water and protect our aquifer. Will that be part of this climate change initiative?
So it's funny you say that, because I got my water bill today. And one of the things that is included in that, and there's a water conservation committee that is meeting regularly and bringing forward, they're taking a data-driven approach, and they're trying to collect and make thoughtful recommendations that way. But in everyone's water bill today, there came Plymouth Water Conservation, Saving Water, it's in your hands, and it has information. It talks about the fact that we don't have an unlimited water supply. I thought this was a nice example of something that was another form of outreach to the community about the importance of this issue, and that. So it just so happens I got this in the mail today. It's right on my desk. So that water conservation committee is looking at a lot of these efforts right now, and that was a group that I was able to learn from through this process as well. And one of their challenges right now is getting some data to make thoughtful recommendations on and how to kind of target different ways to approach, whether it's water rates, policies, or other things. A lot of it's data driven, and so they're doing some work on that right now.
Patrick, it's interesting that your effort did highlight open space with such a high percentage to come in number one. And just speaking of the charter, open space in our charter has been a top priority since 1999. We were the first town, I believe, that actually incorporated into our constitution or charter an open space committee with unique powers and duties to report directly to town meeting, not to any official or any board or any committee, but directly to town meeting, because I believe at the time it was felt, and still we do, that open space in Plymouth is an absolute number one priority. So it's interesting that your efforts confirmed that priority. And we're trying to think of how to put the proper emphasis in a new charter going forward. Are there other questions, issues? Well, thank you very much, Patrick. Appreciate it, and good luck on your efforts.
Thank you for inviting me. And I just, as the parting words through this whole process, that I can't emphasize enough that all the work that came through from this was like dozens and dozens of people that put so many hours, and some are actually on the commission right now and next to you. So I think it's just an example where the community has a focus on this. There's a lot of support in the community for these efforts. And similarly on the town side, in the departments and individual staff members as well, there's just been so many efforts that have for years been going on in this. And I think the point of this and the opportunity here is to bring a centralized focus of how the town as a whole is going to collectively work within our staff departments, work with the community support, and move it forward. It's a tall order to kind of get into, into language, but I think that's the goal, to break down any real or perceived barriers of communication and information sharing, at every level to get towards the same shared goal. That's the goal of this whole effort, and I think it's the goal of everyone who's working on this. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate the invitation.
So our next presenter is Lee Hartman, who's Director of the Planning and Development Department. Thank you, Lee.
I think I'm distanced all right. Hi, Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development. I'm not sure exactly what your format would be for me. What I thought I'd do, if it's okay, is I'll just kind of explain a little bit about the department and give you a little understanding of the department, and then go from there. So we have the Planning Department, Historic District, Historic Preservation, Zoning Board of Appeals, Conservation Commission, Community Development, the Energy Officer, and the Plymouth Redevelopment Authority are really the broad umbrellas of what we have. We have a staff of 11 full-time and 3 part-time employees. Committees is a big part of what we deal with. We have the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, the Historic District Commission, the Zoning Board, Visitors Services Board, Affordable Housing Trust, West Plymouth Steering Committee, North Plymouth Steering Committee, Plymouth Center Steering Committee, Manomet Steering Committee, Cedarville Steering Committee, Energy Committee. We provide staff support to the Open Space Committee with some of the part-time group, not directly under my umbrella, but the Plymouth Redevelopment Authority, as well as the Plymouth Bay Cultural District. So a lot of committee coordination that goes on with my office. We also work with the Old Colony Planning Council, our regional agency, and the Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation, and I also serve as the town's representative to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the group that expends federal funds for road improvements in the region. There's also from time to time a number of other temporary committees that have gone on, and several of you have actually sat on some of those committees as we've looked at gravel removal, or if we looked at affordable housing, some of the other industrial lands committee. So from time to time we have other committees that are going on. I also point out that we're a certified local government, so there's only, I think, 22 of us in Massachusetts. It's a designation through the Department of Interior, so that gives us special preference for any kind of federal grants for historic preservation, and also gives us the opportunity to weigh in on any nominations for the National Register of Historic Places. So actually today, I was just down on the waterfront as they were unveiling the plaque for the Mayflower 2, which was our most recent designation to the National Register of Historic Places. We also, in our department, and it's Rich Vaca, Conservation Planner, we do the community rating service through FEMA, and by running and participating in that process or program, we're able to give property owners a 5% reduction in their flood insurance premiums that go on. There's an ability to have higher amounts. The challenge we have is we just don't have the resources to go for that 10, 15, or 20% reduction, and the types of things we'd have to do to demonstrate to FEMA for a higher reduction, but at least we maintain that 5% reduction in flood insurance program. And grants, I know we were just talking about that, and I would first say that grants are great, but they always require a match. And so oftentimes for us, the challenge is, where's that match come from? And many times we're lucky to do it for in-kind services and not necessarily cash, but most any grant you look at from the federal or state level does require a match. So we were fortunate enough to have approximately $800,000 in community development block grant money that came to us because of COVID, and that came through Peggy Whalen from my office, and that money went directly to many of the small businesses in Plymouth, and it was a great way to help small businesses out during the COVID. So that was $800,000, and I warned Frank that I would take credit for his $300,000 MVP grant So working with Frank and his group, we just received a $304,000 MVP grant to look at saltwater intrusion and climate change and the impact of saltwater intrusion onto our aquifer. We have a $200,000 EDA grant that we worked with the Economic Development Foundation to look at an entrepreneurial center and a way to start to cultivate small businesses and a place to establish for small business startups. We have a $18,000 grant we got to update our hazard mitigation plan. We're very far along with that, moving ahead to update our hazard mitigation plan. Haven't heard yet, but working with the Housing Authority, we've applied for a $150,000 grant for renovations to the Oak Street School with the Housing Authority, which is looking to convert that into 3 affordable Housing Authority units. And we also received a $30,000 grant for what's called Rapid Recovery from the Commonwealth. And that grant we're working with right now with a consultant to go out into the community, do some research, have a professional that is working with us to come back and give us some recommendations for things that we may want to consider to help the downtown business district and some of the businesses down there recover from COVID. So I know that was a lot, but I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of what our office is and what we do. And again, at this point, I would look for your direction for whatever information you'd like.
Presley?
Yeah, Lee, thank you. You're involved in a lot. So you get to see our government in action. What are some of the pluses and minuses and the pros and cons of our current form of government, from town meeting to selectmen to town manager? Because you deal with all of those entities. I just like your, philosophy on dealing with what we have right now as our current form of government.
So when I think about what I do and the role I have, it just recently changed for housing, but for the most part, anything I bring to town meeting is a 2/3 vote. And as you might know, there are a number of town meeting members who automatically vote against almost anything. So it's more like an 80% vote that you need to get, because you're going to just assume that there are certain people who say no. So there's a very high bar for the things I present, or the planning board presents to town meeting, or even as we talk about the conversion of tax title land. We've done about 320 acres of tax title land converted to conservation. Those are all 2/3 votes. So it's a high bar. So I think for me, the public process and working with the community is very important. So I think no matter what form of government it is, it's a very labor-intensive process where you can't just show up and say, we want to do this. There's a lot of work that has to go on before you get to a place where there's a decision. I would say that we now take maybe 1 article a year to town meeting just because of the process. And I'll just explain what happens for me and what goes on. So for us, we're always trying through the planning board, when we have articles that we need to present to town meeting, to be ready and be ready early. So we've already advertised our articles for the October town meeting. I'll talk about April because it works a little better. So we'll have our hearings for April town meeting. We'll have them in October, and then we're ready in November or December to make our presentations on the articles sponsored by the town. So I go through that cycle where I present them to the planning board. I'm at their meetings anyway. Then I go to the selectmen, then I go to advisory finance committee, and then maybe have to end up going to some other groups. Then we go through the budget, and I have to go through the same presentation again for the budget. And then we go through petitioned articles, which always come in at the last minute, and I go through that same. So I'm really, especially in the April town meeting, going through 3 cycles of presentations to different boards. And then depending on how controversial it is, there's a lot of other outreach, sometimes individual precincts, precinct committee or precinct chairs, those groups looking for presentations too. So the tough part is you just simply can't take on 3 or 4 different initiatives because it's just so much work to do any individual one. So I think for me, any way to kind of make that process a little less labor intensive, and especially with the night meetings, to have to do those, that would help make it a little more efficient and make it a little easier to present more articles than what we do. But I will say, zoning is very complicated, and we spend a lot of time, even on some of the simplest bylaws, trying to make sure we get them right and get them corrected. Most recently, at the last town meeting, we had to revise our flood maps, our flood bylaw. The maps are easy. But the federal government had a standard model bylaw that we had to adopt. Hundreds of hours of time between myself and town council, looking at their example, fitting it into our bylaw, and making sure we have it right. So it's a pretty labor-intensive process. And again, the way town meeting is set now, it makes it very difficult to do more than one, and especially if there's any controversy in it.
Follow up, Bill? There's been a lot of recent controversy with the planning board. And bluntly, I'd just like to, in your opinion, that board in particular, or boards that you deal with, is there a better way of managing those boards or constructing those boards so that it's better maintained? I guess that's what it was.
So this came up the last Charter Commission too. And my only comment is, and I've been doing this now for over 34 years, I've worked with really good appointed officials and really bad appointed officials. I've worked with really good elected officials and really bad elected officials. So, I mean, I think I think it really, either way, it doesn't guarantee, and I think that's what you were getting at. I really don't think it guarantees that you'll have a better success rate, whether they're appointed or elected. I will say that, as I mentioned, all those committees that we have, it's a constant challenge to find volunteers. And oftentimes, as I can almost see with this group, it's the same volunteers who show up for the majority of what goes on. So I think the biggest challenge we have is actually trying to find volunteers who are willing to sit on some of these boards. And the irony of it, too, is if you really want, for example, on a planning board or zoning board, an excellent candidate would be somebody with engineering experience. The problem is those engineers also work in the town, so it makes it, and that's proper, it's not improper, but it makes it impossible to have those people who maybe would have additional expertise to offer to sit on a board, because that's also their livelihood.
Lee, you listed a whole pile of functions and boards and committees that you're responsible for. The question is, are there any in there that you don't think really fit, that maybe they should not be in your department?
I would say
What
no.
I'm wondering about is some of the permit granting boards, like the Conservation
Yeah.
Commission or the Board of Appeals.
So,
Are they in the right
yeah,
spot?
No, I would say the vast majority of what we do is permitting. So we talk about a lot of other things, but the major boards for permitting are Historic District Commission, Planning Board, Zoning Board, and Conservation Commission. So when we meet at staff, we're able to make sure that we know we're in the office. We meet every Thursday morning to discuss what cases are before which boards, to make sure that we're coordinating the review process between each of those boards. So I actually think it works very well to have all those groups that do the permitting under one umbrella.
Well, I think what I'm concerned about is one of the functions of your department is to develop and maintain the comprehensive master plan. And that was very, I think in the charter, that is a very important point, that is the master plan. And I know the Plymouth master plan needs some work, right?
I agree, yep.
Is it in the right department? I mean, we asked the town manager, the assistant town manager, when she was here, what she felt, whether she felt any responsibility for the master plan. And I think she said it's in the planning department, but that they are certainly cooperative. I mean, who should be the go-to person for the maintenance of our comprehensive master plan, which is more than just a plan? The zoning articles are supposed to follow the master plan. When an article, a rezoning is proposed, one of the first things that was intended to happen, the way the charter was written, was, is it consistent with the master plan? And is that being done? I'm just not sure that we do that.
I would speak, and we can't really control petitioned articles, but definitely I would say that there's nothing that we would present that goes to town meeting that's inconsistent with the master plan. So a master plan can, especially this day and age, can be a lot of different things too. And so from time to time, I've gone to the capital outlay committee looking for money for a master plan update, for money to do design standards for downtown development, for additional GIS flyover information. The difficult thing the town of Plymouth has is that I'm competing against computers for children in the school, or new fire trucks, or roofs for fire stations. So I honestly, in the last 4 or 5 years, haven't gone through that capital process. It takes a fair amount of time, and I've never ranked. So it's hard, because I think if somebody said to me today, here's a chunk of change to do a master plan update, we'd started it immediately. The big problem is getting the resources to get that master plan going. The other thing about the master plan is, by state law, statutorily, the master plan is under the jurisdiction of the planning board through state law. So the planning board is the keeper of the master plan and the zoning bylaw. So I think it's a good place. The one piece that does get a little unusual is a master plan will also talk sometimes about public facilities. So the planning board, my department, has no control over, say, public works or environmental affairs. So there could be recommendations in there to do implementation, but that's really would be separate from anything we could control. But if you do it right, all of those groups are all participating in that master plan and all giving their input. So whatever that plan comes up with should be consistent with what the things that they'd like to be doing and moving ahead with.
Frank?
So Lee, do you think, I mean, one of the things that I am concerned about is a disconnect between, let's say, the planning board and the master plan, the planning department and the master plan, in that they're not necessarily working together, I think. One of the things I've come across, I wanted your opinion about whether you think this would be a redundant thing or not, is a lot of charters that I've come across, Brookline, for example, others, have a charter compliance committee. They have individuals that are making sure that, as Bill was saying, any new regulations or existing regulations, or the way that regulations and zoning and things that are being enacted are in compliance with the master plan. It's a complex issue. It's, I mean, looking at the charter of Brookline, it's 500 plus pages or whatever. Ours is as well complex when you realize it's supposed to be in sync with our zoning regulations and our enforcement and other things. Do you think something like that? Because
Yeah,
what we're after
yes.
here is,
Yeah.
what I'm after here is how these ideas and your experience and
Yes.
the goals we have as a community can be in the charter,
and I-
regardless of what
right.
form of government we have.
And I think the point is an excellent point. So for a while there, I was doing, for the Capital Outlay Committee, a review for consistency with the master plan. Now, I don't think I would ever say it's inconsistent, but I would point out what's consistent and what meets, and maybe I'm silent on ones that are inconsistent, because these are other departments that are looking for this money. But I did that for 3 or 4 years, but it's just so very labor intensive with all the other duties we have. But I think it's an excellent point. It was very well received by Capital Outlay. They really appreciated it, to the point where one more year they said, well, can you do it again? And all right. But again, and then as things get busy, it's just one of those things that is very hard to get to, especially because between the timeline where their list comes out, and then you have to look at all of the things in the master plan, look at everything there. But I thought it was a very useful exercise to do that. And I think I take your point, maybe as we go through future town meeting articles, talking about a point of consistency with the master plan, so the planning board has a fairly, normal boilerplate recommendation to town meeting, but something in there about comments to the master plan would probably be a very good thing to add.
Larry?
Lee, the 2/3 that you talk about, those are mostly state requirements, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's just a matter of translating that into
Yeah.
your effort, yeah.
And so I would say one of the hardest things for me is that Massachusetts has one of the worst sets of enabling legislation for zoning, and you've dealt with some of the nightmares that I've dealt with. There are so many things that we can't do in Massachusetts that other states just do. Impact fees are illegal, exactions are illegal. Approval not required. The planning board actually determines that a plan doesn't require their approval. The only state in the United States that has such a crazy thing. And we've seen crazy examples over the years where, whether it's Red Brook or Pine Hills or somebody with a very large piece of property can literally create 500 house lots, and we have no control over that. So the laws we have in Massachusetts really need to be updated. The state just recently made a bunch of changes, which was great, but they were all focused on housing production. And we have a governor right now with a goal of, I think it was 350,000 new houses to be built in Massachusetts. And for me, I look and say, thank you, we have enough in Plymouth. And if anything, we need to stop or slow it down or something. Our goal is directly in conflict with what the Commonwealth is, which is to create more housing. And we see that right now, that with the 40Bs. We have a 200-unit 40B going on in Manamet. We have a 320-unit 40B being constructed behind Home Depot, and we have a 320-unit 40B about to be constructed behind Dick's Sporting Goods. It's just a phenomenal amount of growth, and it's very disappointing that the state says, sorry, that's what we need and that's what we want, and that's your problem, not ours. Very, very discouraging for me.
I had one more, Bill, if I could.
Lord?
Yeah, we have a lot of power, actually, on this commission to recommend. Unfortunately, it doesn't extend to state laws. So we understand you. I certainly understand your pain. Your department deals probably more with the quality of life for individual citizens and individual communities, individual neighborhoods than anyone else in town. And I have facetiously, I think, said that I think that the town should have complete control over everything except in my neighborhood. And I think that everyone feels that way, which then makes the whole town there. Is there something, I mean, clearly my goal is democratic control over the life of Plymouth. But at the same time, there have to be rules that go into that. Can you come back to us or tell us now your recommendations on a better way that the town can approach that conflict?
I think came up at the previous discussion. If we own it, we control it. And so as we talk about that, whether it's a 30% or a 50%, I just point out that those numbers didn't include the state forest. So the state forest is about 20% of the town that's protected through the state. But I think the answer is, if we want to control the destiny, we own it. And then, maybe it's not all conservation. We decide we want to have some affordable housing or something, we could control that. But I think if you really want to control your destiny with what goes on, ownership is the key. And I think, the work that Bill does is absolutely incredible. The planning board has protected thousands of acres. It's mostly privately held through associations. But if you look at, say, Red Brook, for example, conservation restrictions will be on 1,600 acres. They have a development footprint of about 400 acres. So I think the planning board is doing quite a bit to protect land, and I know there are certain issues and things that are out there that are contrary to that, but there's a lot of land that's been protected that way. But again, I think the answer is, if we own it, then we can control the destiny of what we want. If we don't own it, especially in the rural parts of town, we have low-density 3-acre zoning. Can't go the state would not allow us to do any more than that. We've really kind of pushed the envelope already to how much we can limit development. But again, I think if we want to control the quality, we should be looking at ways to acquire as much of that as possible. And thankfully, this conversation goes on, because I would say maybe 5-6 years ago, there were still a lot of people arguing that housing development pays for itself, and it's good to have housing, and it creates more revenue than it generates. And it doesn't seem, I haven't heard that argument recently, and I think people recognize that residential development puts a strain on the municipality.
Yeah. And that's an important thing when you start to look at zoning as it relates to cost of services and what you can do locally to control that event. But it's frustrating, because Plymouth is really controlled by state regulations, and the state regulations come from your House and your Senate. And it was very disappointing when the governor had signed this law that relinquished the two-thirds vote when it comes to housing without any real definition to get to affordable housing. It's just trickle-down housing.
Right.
Let's just start building as many housing units as possible, and hopefully they'll become affordable.
And I always
And that didn't work, it's never worked.
Right.
And a town like Plymouth, where we're still quite a bit open space, zoned residential, it's a harrowing thing to look at. But as we start to move through this permitting process, as we move through the master plan process, do you think there's a way of highlighting aspects of the master plan and actually turning them into articles and going to town meeting and making part of our bylaw?
Oh,
So it's
certainly.
not just the document sitting there
Yeah.
kind of advising us and hopefully somebody picks it up.
Yeah.
But is there something that
Yeah.
you can see in our charter that would make that a stronger reality?
So I kind of look at planning, master plan, that there are no right or wrong answers. So each town kind of gets to decide what they want or not. So I think, as everybody has pointed out, it's a good time to sit back and say, in 1980, we adopted the Village Centers Plan, which I think has worked very well for the community, where we direct growth and investment of our, primary investment of our infrastructure in those villages. And then anywhere else outside of there, we try to actively discourage development. I think that's worked well. But again, I think it's a good time to look back and say, all right, so 1980, we did this, 2004, we did an update. Are we still on the right path? Are there other things we should be thinking about? Are there other things that we should look at? And those answers come more from the community than it would come from me. I mean, I certainly have my opinions, but it's really a community decision to say, well, what do you want to be when you grow up, Plymouth? And what are the things that are most important to you? And I think a lot of that is happening even already with the dialogue you had. I think for a large degree, the master plan is probably just going to reinforce those things. But as you talk about climate resiliency and the work that Patrick Flaherty is doing, that's a perfect thing to just add into the scope of work for a master plan and really focus on that.
Thank you. Lee, I'm in awe of your list of things that you're in charge of. And I know you have a fabulous, and having worked with your department, I know you have a fabulous department. Are there any changes to the charter that would make your job or the people in your department's job easier, better, more, better for the town?
Yeah, so I did review the charter, and I did not see anything that really jumped out at me that said, these are important changes. I would mention, going back to what Patrick Flaherty said, when you look at the types of things that resiliency report is talking about and what they want to focus on, I think that's a town manager position, because you need the power of the town manager so that it's not myself making a recommendation to emergency management. We're peers. I can't tell emergency management what to do or set their priorities. So I think if we have something that's that important that wants to set town policy, it needs to come more from the top than horizontally, where one division or one department is trying to tell another department what their priorities should be. So that was the only observation I had based on the discussion you had earlier.
Betsy, follow up?
Yes. One of the things that's been, you listed you have 11 people full-time and 3 part-time. One of the things that's been on my mind for a while is we're a very large town with a lot of coastal property as well as many ponds, and we only have one conservation agent, and there are towns a lot smaller than we are that have 2 or 3.
Yes?
I would really love to see more conservation agents.
Yep.
Would but that would not be something that would go into a charter, right?
No, but we would agree with you. I mean, we just recently, so a number of years ago, we had 2 planners, and we had a reduction, we had a downturn, and one of those positions was eliminated. So we just recently, within the last 2 years, got that position back. And that planning position really is focused on, if you look at what the zoning board or the planning board does, these votes have 20, 30 conditions on every vote. And so we have this person who's solely focused on a gravel removal permit. Here's your 20 conditions. Are you complying with those? And on a zoning permit or a planning board permit, are you meeting all the conditions that are outlined? So we just got that position back. But definitely, I think if we had the opportunity to expand the staff and have another conservation, either an agent or an assistant, that would be great. During COVID, we had to do a reduction, and we lost the part-time administrative assistant we had there. So we have actually had less staff now than we had in conservation a year and a half ago.
Well, I hope you will bring a second conservation to town meeting. As a town meeting member, I would certainly want to vote for that if we could afford it. Second question is, would you agree that perhaps an increase to 7 planning board members might be beneficial? We recently had a very controversial decision that only 3 people made a pretty big decision that was not well received by a lot of people. Do you think that because we have somebody out, or, somebody's sick, or somebody's left, and now we only have 4 planning board members left, do you see that it would be beneficial for the Charter Commission to increase the number of planning board members to 7?
So personally, no, because that's just 2 more people I have to constantly respond to. But yes, I mean, I think the dynamics of a board, once it's over 7, starts to become very difficult. But 5 to 7, there's no magic, and I think if that's something the community would like to do, I see no issue with 5 or 7. Just make sure the next 2 don't call me every day, but other than that, no, I don't think there's any magic to it. ZBA is able by state law to have 2 alternates, so they essentially have a 7-member committee already, and that works great. For whatever reason, the state law for planning boards says you can only have 1 alternate, and that alternate can only vote on special permits. They can't vote on other things occurring. So, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad thing.
So just to follow up on conservation, the Conservation Commission and the Zoning Board right now are appointed. And I agree with you, they've been great elected and great appointed people and vice versa, but I would like to see the Conservation Commission and the Zoning Board elected for the following reason, and that is because it brings it more into the public eye. Right now, the Conservation Commission, pretty much nobody knows what they're doing and when they're doing it and how they're doing it. And I think the Zoning Board is a little more, people are more knowledgeable about what the Zoning Board is doing, but still, it's kind of happening in the background. I think if we had an elected Conservation Commission and an elected Zoning Board, as people are running for those positions, it would just become more public that we have these commissions and that they're very important. Could you comment on that, please?
Again, I mean, I think that's a more of a political decision. To me, whether they're appointed or elected, I've worked with a whole range of them, and I've worked with all of them, and it always seems to work no matter how you do that. I really don't. I wouldn't have an opinion one way or the other. We have a hard time getting volunteers. We've had a hard time getting the alternates on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'd be a little nervous about who wants to invest that much time and money to run for an office, whether people would be willing to do that for things like Concom and Zoning Board, but I wouldn't know.
Lee, can I ask you one question about, and you comment on the grant writing operation within the town? It seems to me, just looking at it as an outsider, that there are people writing grants in your department, and certainly in the Department of Public Works, in David Gould's department, that all these grants are kind of coming up through these different departments, and I'm wondering, is there coordination between these grants so there isn't overlap between different grants that have been awarded and applied for? Or is this a conscious effort to sort of have competition between department heads? Kind of like Lincoln's
Absolutely
scheme?
not. Almost everything that David Gould has worked on and JB has worked on, I've participated in. Just very recently, well, you can pick on Frank Mann again, his MVP grant that he had. David Gould was interested in one, and he was going to apply for an MVP grant, so we told Frank, sorry, we can't support your petition. At the last minute, David said it's not going to work for what I wanted to go for, so that's when we called Frank and said, let's go into high gear and put yours in. So, no, we work always, that there's information they need from my office, information I need from them, that we work and I think even Bill can tell you that too, with the number of grants he's gone on. I'm not aware of ever having a problem where you've had two competing grants. I think people are always pretty cognizant about taking the best project and moving it forward. And I would also say that's why we have a town manager, because if we ever got to that point, then it would be her decision or his, whoever's in charge, to say, no, this is our priority and what we're going to go through. But no, we're all very aware of what we're applying for.
No, that's an experience that I've had over the last 20 years when we've been writing grants with the Community Preservation Act to help fund with some of the recommendations that we're making to town meeting. We're looking for additional funding. So we've worked with every department from planning to the Office of Marine Environmental Affairs to DPW to engineering. It's amazing all the different departments that are involved in getting grants that have something to do with preservation, whether it's housing, historical, open space. So as we start looking at this grant writer, the coordination of those activities, even though it's naturally, organically happening very successfully right now, but the having someone focused on that and coordinating it across the towns and always kind of out there. One of the things that I've noticed that can be problematic is that the time of different staff people is, the requirements of their day and the amount of work that they have to do is enormous. So to research grant opportunities, that can be problematic at times, that if you had somebody that was dedicated to look at all the grants that were coming down the road, dedicated to, and saying, hey, guess what, there's this thing coming out that might help the Department of Engineering or DPW, or it might help the Planning Department or a CPA acquisition, that I see that as the one thing that I see in the process that could use some strengthening is the proactive research necessary to see what federal, state, and local grants and private grants are out there, because they're out there.
I would also add that a position like that, and again, I'll refer to Frank too, and he can tell you the amount of information you need to pull together to meet their specific questions, their goals, and the things they outline. It's a monumental amount of work sometimes for some of these grants. Some of them are simple, but some of them are a very intense process that you have to go through to get filed. For example, the EDA grant we have, I think it's $3 million through JB to do some water improvement works in Manomet. He had to hire a consultant to do it because it's so complex to go through that federal EDA process that we really can't do it in-house. And now, Frank, you can tell us about your experience.
Painful.
And again, so you could see having somebody in a position to help you do that would have been a great resource for you.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely, I never thought of it as in terms of, as we look at a possible grant writer, what could we put on that person's radar? Not only researching the possible grants, but actually diving into some of those elements, because most of the people that are writing grants right in town right now are sacrificing their primary responsibility to write a grant.
Right.
So that's the little danger, and at different times, when I get a call, like I remember when Dr. Nate was going after the MVP grant, and he called us up looking for information, and I always like, yeah, we'll get it right to you, because I know the enormous amount of work that these people have to do to get these grants,
And there's a lot of follow-up too.
and we're
for-
just a piece of it.
So right now, the hazard mitigation plan grant that we have, I have to get payroll stubs. I have to have a copy of each check that we pay the consultant, not just the check, but the canceled check, front and back.
Yeah.
I have to give them evidence that it was on on the town's payoff list. So even just the follow-up works, in kind, where I have to document. So for this grant, I have to document my hours, David Gould's hours, Rich Vaca's hours that they put into this grant for the in-kind. And then I have to have the finance department give me an actual verification that they actually work those days. So those types of things as follow-up to these grants, it's just a phenomenal amount of work.
Yeah. It's a lot of hoops, but it's worth it when you get the money.
Oh, yeah, and again, if you had a position who I could just say, here's my spreadsheet for in-kind work, and have them chase down to
Right.
pull out that payroll information, that could save a huge amount of time for me.
Right. So Lee, thank you very much for coming in tonight. If in the weeks ahead or months you come up with some thoughts of what we can put in the charter, whichever way we go that helps your department, be sure to let us know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bill, could I ask just one last question? Lee, you probably don't know this off the top of your head, but perhaps you could tell me where to find out. I would like to know how many houses, dwellings, et cetera, are in the pipeline right now. That means, you know, there's no shovel in the ground yet, but we know that they are permitted in coming.
Yeah, there aren't many projects out there right now that haven't started construction. I could look. We also have on our website, and it's still we update it twice a year. If you go to the planning department website under documents, there's a thing that says current development map, and it will list where the developments are occurring right now in town. So the biggest ones right now are still 80 Makepeace, the Red Brook, and even the Pine Hills, although they're starting to very quickly get to the end of their number of homes they're allowed. But those are the two biggest ones. But right now, Atlantic Country Club is out there looking to do a development, and don't think there are many others that are just pending right now.
So guesstimate that people who are not living in the house yet, but they're either going to be constructed or under construction, would that be a couple of thousand?
No, I would say it would be under 1,000.
Under 1,000.
When you look at Red Brook and the Pine Hills, it's under 1,000, but, yeah. I would also say still, so for the first time ever, Plymouth used to not be a desirable place for 40Bs because people just couldn't make money when you looked at what the average house price is. But we've increased so much right now that right now we have a 2-year safe harbor for the projects that are in. So the state says that if you build a certain percentage of affordable, you can claim what's called safe harbor. So we have that for 2 years right now. But I can tell you right now that there were 2 or 3 projects out there that are ready to come in with another 300-unit 40Bs as soon as that 2 years goes up. It's really frightening.
So thank you, Lee, and we will, so stay in touch with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next guest and speaker by Zoom is Jonathan Bader, the head of the Department of Public Works, and we see you on our big screen. So Jonathan, we're anxious to hear what you have to say, and then we have some questions. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Again, Jonathan Beater, Director of Public Works. Appreciate the invitation. And Patrick and Lee did a fantastic job. I'm just going to kind of follow their lead a little bit as far as an introduction goes. And I'll be brief. I know it's getting late, but DPW is about 120 employees, 3 unions, 13 divisions, fleet administration. We have a safety compliance officer now, water source, solid waste, engineering, highway, parks and forestry, cemetery. We have a crematory, and we now have our facility division. I've been here since March in 2011. Town meeting, the whole process has been, very well received in terms of public works. We're very familiar with it. It's worked very well in terms of addressing the needs of the town and what we need to do in terms of infrastructure. It's busy throughout the calendar year. The process is definitely very detailed. I worked in another community prior to coming to Plymouth, and Plymouth is very advanced and technical in terms of its approach as we bring these projects forward. The one difference I can say and tell the Charter Commission as far as public works goes is we do mostly a significant amount of capital work. Over the past 10 years, we average between $7 and $10 million, with a bulk of it coming from water and sewer. Those 2 pieces of infrastructure are integral to the town. You have about 15,000 customers on the water side and a little over 3,300 on the sewer side. Both are functioning very well. In addition to the funding piece, we have to comply with the regulatory pieces, both at the local, federal, and state level. So that adds a different twist. But again, going through the process, it overall goes very well. There's a lot of detail that's put into it, starting with Capital Improvement Committee and then going to the Select Board and Advisory and Finance. And both of them, all 3 of those are very different in the approach. And we start now. We've been working on our planning for capital for the fall town meeting. And then we start our budget cycle in September, as you're well aware. But there's been a lot of good positive change over the years. We've seen a lot of good changes in the capital improvement process. Most recently, in terms of how that's organized and put forward, I thought this year was probably one of the best years and most effective years for us in terms of how we move capital forward. I know there's a lot of talk of Burke's Law and outstanding capital that we're really trying to work on in terms of getting those types of projects completed and moving forward. But from what I've seen in working with our division heads, the process works. We interact with all the other departments very well. I know we talked about grants. We all work together on the grants, but they are very involved. We've seen a significant amount of grant money this year. As Lee mentioned, the EDA grant of $3.8 million, and we're hoping for another $2 million for the Cherry and Court Street intersection. But all the work is done in-house. Most of the work is done in-house by staff. A lot of great qualified staff, a lot of professional staff at the OP level and SEIU level, and then the COBRA employees that carry out all the work, day-to-day operations. But again, we are different from some of the other departments in terms of maintenance and operations, where it doesn't stop. It's 24/7 operations. So those are kind of what we do. And most of all, I will say we do have some committees that we work with. We have a Roads Advisory Committee. We now have a Water Conservation Committee and a Cemetery Committee. Those have been very helpful to us depending on the situation or the case that's involved with the Roads Advisory is appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and the Water Conservation and the Cemetery Committee was the same. Roads Advisory has been around for a couple of decades now, the other two more recently, but they are very helpful to us in terms of carrying out work and looking, ahead in terms of the needs and improvements that can be made. So that's pretty much a general overview of the DPW. From what I've seen, and as I just stated, the process works. Can we tweak a few little things here and there? Yes. But for us, it's mostly the capital process that's very detailed. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Larry.
JB, there's been some criticism, obviously, about maintenance of the town's built structures. I've been reading charters, and there are charters that actually mention maintenance and have a position mandated by the charter. Is that something Plymouth needs? And if not, do you have any suggestions as far as the charter is concerned that would make your job more effective?
First, Larry, it's good to see you. How you doing? It's been a little bit, but yeah. So there's been a lot of significant improvements, across the board in DPW over the years. We've done a lot of great work with roads, water, sewer. Cemeteries are looking great, and now we're really focused on facilities. And there have been good and tremendous strides with facilities in terms of positions and, funding. Town meeting approved the stabilization fund, which is great. But in terms of a dedicated position through the charter, I do, I would defer to this group and have additional conversations. But yeah, I don't see a downfall to that. I think it's a critical position with the 31 buildings we have, especially, with all the work that's going on in the fire stations. It's a constant and proactive issue that we need to follow and implement in terms of money towards the buildings, Larry. But yeah, I think that, yes, that position is critical, and it needs to be a foundation moving forward for the town to rely on, what's put in to the buildings in terms of investment for new construction and preventative maintenance. So to answer your question, yes, I do think that's something that should be looked at carefully.
Mr. Whistling.
Yeah, hey, GB. So in the current, it's the same question I ask everybody, but you have to do there's a lot of different projects that you have to go through. You have to get approval, you have to go, and is there anything in the current form of government that, is where the bottleneck is that could be improved, for approval of different things and the process? I'm just looking for good ideas from, people who are in the trenches that, how we can improve the process. And I'm looking at Brook Road, and the process that went through and how we can learn from that and different ways that, the government the process can help you, and how what could be changed to help the DPW do its job?
Well, thank you for asking that question. When it comes to projects, like Brook Road or a water main project, I think we take those case by case, and we definitely learn and adapt as we move forward. The only thing that I've seen, and I witnessed this firsthand, is the question has come up about competing. You don't have departments competing. I think we all work very well together. But what I see in terms of public works is we compete against ourselves in terms of the way public works is brought forward. Not necessarily your enterprise funds, water, sewer, and solid waste. Those are ranked independently because they're enterprise. But all the other divisions of DPW, the 10 other divisions of DPW, when that capital process goes forward, you have highway competing against engineering, administration, fleet, cemeteries. That's the only flaw I see in the system in terms of available resources and when it comes to capital and funding. Because again, there's only so many dollars that can be spread amongst the town, and we understand that. But that's the only thing that I see as an issue within the DPW. I have division heads, and we have to prioritize projects, and that's difficult. It's difficult for us to put forward a road project in engineering or a parks project when they're significant dollars wrestling. That's what I see.
So it seems like, that there's some infrastructure problem where, you got to go and you got to say, you've got to highly prioritize every project you do. And as the DPW director, you've got all these department heads who are saying, well, I need this money and I need this money. And how do you prioritize that, and how can it be better? That, I just see the DPW always struggling at town meetings saying, look, we really need this, but we also need this. And town meeting saying, well, we don't see that as a priority. And, I just see there could be some sort of, I don't know, but it just seems like there's always a project that we've got to get done. And I know from knowing you've been trying to get this project done for years, but it's never been a priority. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, happy to. So we have a lot of planning tools. I know that Lee was asking questions about master planning. We have a water master plan. We have a sewer system master plan. We have a road, a pavement management plan. Those tools are very helpful, and we follow those. I will say the last town meeting, we presented 3 capital projects only, which was very helpful. And what we do internally is we meet with all division heads, and we prioritize those. And we discuss them at length in terms of which ones we're going to put forward, because we know there's only limited funding available. But, overall big picture, I think it would be a very healthy discussion in terms of, utilizing general fund money in terms of how we can fund all the different departments moving ahead, whether it be DMEA, fire, police, DPW. How we move those forward, I think, would be helpful wrestling. But overall, we do spend a lot of time internally, debating, beneficial projects, whether it be an ADA issue, a infrastructure issue, a parks issue. All of those things are discussed at length internally before they're put forward to town meeting. The other piece I do want to mention is, fall town meeting versus spring town meeting. A lot of fall town meeting articles are unforeseen issues, whether it be a HVAC system at the PD or Brook Road, both which you'll see at fall town meeting versus which happens in the spring, more a long-term planning approach. But there's always going to be unforeseen issues that come up, and we do a really good job at addressing those and providing the information. But again, overall, it's a big town, and there were a lot of things that were done substandard in the town decades ago that we're catching up on. So I do think you're seeing a lot of these things level off. Water enterprise, sewer enterprise, I think we're getting those under control, and now it's more of the buildings. So I think these stabilization funds are very a healthy means to address those. And I think over time, less capital, construction projects, new construction projects will happen. It's more of, maintenance and upkeep.
Facilities, to what extent and what is the current coordination with the school department and their facilities? I know this has come up in past charters, whether there should be a single maintenance division where all the town's buildings were covered. What's the status of this right now?
I
How
know,
is it
I know
done?
that the select, so right now it's completely separate, Bill. Schools, they maintain their buildings and we maintain ours. I know that the select board has charged the manager with, consolidation effort. And there have been a few discussions in that regard as far as how we make that happen, but nothing definitively has been set at this time.
Okay. Another question that's come up in the past is, and I know it's a sensitive one, is town employees, and you have a lot of them, should there be a requirement that they live in Plymouth?
That's not a question that, I can answer, Bill. I know that's come up a lot. It's difficult to recruit today on all different aspects when it comes to employee positions, especially when it comes to those licensed employees. I think the residency requirement is difficult when it comes to that, especially, given, the inability for us today to hire these people. I mean, we're down a multitude of positions right now due to COVID, the economy, the construction sector is booming right now, and our pay rate's a little bit below average. So all of those things that exist presently, and then a residency requirement, I think would hurt that.
Questions? Betsy?
Thank you. This question may be for the person who's in charge of water, but one of the questions I've been asking over the years is about our aquifer. We have golf courses, we have cranberry operations, we have a lot of different ways that our aquifer is affected. We also have a tremendous amount of new construction. Is there somebody who knows what the top number of people and homes? I'm even talking within 1,000 or 10,000. At what point will our aquifer be stressed by having too many people? I know we have, under my house is the aquifer, and I have a well and I have a septic system. And the septic system stresses our water quality, and my use of water takes water out of our aquifer, and that reduces our ponds to a certain extent. And we know the golf courses and the cranberry bogs are certainly using a lot of water. So at what point can anybody ever say, okay, 100,000 people, that's what Plymouth can sustain? I do know there's a national average of the amount of water each person uses each day, and it's actually quite high in terms of showers and dishwashers and washing machines. So is there somebody who can say that, or will we have to wait until we're in crisis and we don't have enough water?
It's a great question, Betsy, and I think it's one we could talk about for hours, but the short answer is no. But the way our system works, so remember, so those private water systems are not, controlled, maintained, and operated by the town. So our water system is regulated by the Mass DEP, and we have two permits. We have the South Coastal Basin and the Buzzards Bay Basin. Both of those permits expire in 2030, and they stipulate how much water we can pump annually. So that's our limitation in terms of, how much water we can pump on an annual basis. So can we tell you how many homes can be built? No, but at some point we will reach that limit. We're not there yet, but we will be. It's something we are aware of and something we're looking at, but it is difficult to answer your question because, it is, the Plymouth Carver aquifer is a tremendous aquifer. I think we're sitting on 7 billion gallons of water. And the issue that we have in Plymouth, it's not the water in the ground, it's our ability to pump and move it. So those are the shortfalls or the issues that we've been dealing with. But to answer your questions, I can't answer your question, Betsy. I can't tell you how many homes, but I can tell you, Plymouth has very good water quality. We have come a long way in terms of, lifting the Derby restriction and some major capital projects to make sure we have enough water to provide from a drinking water perspective.
Thank you very much. I want to say one last thing, and that is, again, I'm in awe of all that you do and all of the balls you have to keep in the air, including the political ones. And I think that all the people that we have heard, finance director, the people we've heard tonight and so forth, are a real testimony to how fabulous this town is, that we've attracted such great people who are so dedicated. So thank you for all that you do.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Jimmy, thank you very much. We're involved in a multi-month process here, so if you could think of some ideas that are going to help us in our charter, come back to us and tell us. Anytime,
I
we'll
will.
be doing this for the next year. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, have a great night. Thank you very much.
Very good. So that completes this part of the agenda. So at this point, it would be appropriate to ask if there's any public comment. So, Mr. Candy, comment. Go ahead.
Kevin Canty, Precinct 1. For those members of the committee that were present and viewers at home, I was present as one of the guest speakers at the last meeting on July 15th, but I'm here in my capacity as a private concerned citizen on this particular evening. And the reason that I'm here is I felt compelled to come and make a public comment after sitting through your entire meeting, last meeting on July 15th, and specifically in relation to the disconnect between your initial invitation to me to speak in my official capacity at your last meeting, and then your response to my comments, which suggest a misunderstanding on your part of some of your members, and also some of the broader comments that were made by your members throughout the meeting, particularly later on in the meeting during your sort of free-form open discussion section. So first, the invitation itself. So the text of the email that was sent to me on Monday, July 12th, 2021 at 12:14 p.m. On behalf of the Charter Commission, they would like to extend invitations to each of you as guest speakers at their next meeting. They want to listen to recommendations you could share regarding improvements in the government of each of your departments and/or the town in general. To date, the Commission has had productive discussions with Marlene McCollum, Lynn Barrett, and David Gould. Charter Commission meeting Thursday, July 15th, 7 p.m., Great Hall. If everyone can attend Thursday's meeting, I will schedule 30-minute time slots for each of you. Please let me know if you can attend. I responded that I could attend and did do so. Lee Hartman and Jonathan Beater were also on that email. They didn't attend that meeting. Obviously, they were here tonight to make their comments and be heard. So, despite the comments that were made by one of your members at the last meeting, who, to be fair to that particular member, may have been unclear as to what was actually sent out, I was invited to speak as to the improvements that I would see made to the town in general, and the government of this town in general. And I think that makes sense, given the experience that I have and the insight that I could provide to a commission that was interested in hearing that feedback. However, then, the remarks of that member alone are one thing, but what compelled me to speak tonight was later comments made by several members, again, those that were in attendance, a couple were not, that you weren't interested in hearing what I thought the town government should be, despite the text of your invitation, or what other future invitees might think. Because in your own words, that was up to you and you guys alone to make a decision on and a determination on. Such a belief that you don't need to hear what other people think in making your determination and decision at the end of this process is, in my mind, a grave error. While it is true that the 9 of you will make a recommendation at the culmination of your work at the end of this process that will go before the voters, it would be a serious error in judgment not to listen to the opinions of your invitees, including town officials and members of the public, whether they agree with your pre-existing beliefs about what government in this town should be or not. Failure to do so would, in my mind, be a dereliction of your duty and a disservice to the public. And your remarks and comments made by several of your members that were in attendance at the last meeting suggest that a significant number of you are already headed down that path. I implore you, for the sake of our community, not to continue down that road and to instead actually hear from and listen to a diversity of perspectives before making your recommendations to the voters. And I remember I signed the signature petition initiative that actually saw this commission formed. And the slogan of the people that were putting forward that particular initiative was join the conversation. And I thought when I walked in here, again, in my official capacity, on July 15th, that that's what you had invited me to do. Now, I understand that many of the people that put that petition together didn't end up getting elected. And I received the mailing like every other registered voter in town with many names on it, and I saw who got elected. So I can tell which way the wind is blowing, just like a weather vane. But nevertheless, I think join the conversation is a good mindset to get into. And that if you've already made up your mind about what you want to see and what you don't want to see at the beginning of a long process, then you are doing a serious disservice to the people that elected you. And that you should keep an open mind and listen to the viewpoints of people that agree with you and do not agree with you when formulating these decisions and these recommendations. I hope that you are able to live up to that in the future. I personally did not feel that several of your members lived up to that on July 15th.
Mr. Candy, thank you very much for your lecture. But let me assure you that this, I can speak for myself and certainly as other members of the commission, I've certainly been paying attention to what's going on. We've heard from a number of people, a number of different points of view. No one here has expressed a point of view. We're exploring all options. Your comments, if you look at our minutes from that meeting where you appeared, are covered in detail as to your position. I don't think there's any question. There's a whole page of the minutes of Mr. Candy's recommendations and thoughts about our town government. So it seems to me it's kind of a lecture that you'd written before we started our proceedings. So we heard it tonight. Thank you very much.
I would just like to point out that I was told that public comment would be 7 minutes in length, and Mr. Abbott decided to interrupt me at 5 minutes and 19
you seem to be
seconds.
getting,
I did notice at the last meeting that Mr. Abbott tends to interrupt members of the commission as well as speakers several times, and I would encourage a chair of a public body not to do so and to allow the people that are speaking before you to speak and to follow your own rules of conduct when you do so.
so I think
With that in mind, it has been 6 minutes and 24 seconds, and I will conclude my remarks. Thank you.
any other comment? Public comment? Thank you. So we're now to we have some discussion items and we have a few minutes to cover them. So the charters, each member of the commission here is, Michelle, I believe, has already selected our 3 or 4 charters to review. And starting at our next meeting, you've sent out the list of the charters. And starting at our next meeting, 2 weeks from now, we will begin to review the outlines of the points in those charters that we think have significance or something that we want to look at for Plymouth. And that will start at the next meeting, which will be the week of August 19th. The next item is the invitation to other town officials and committee heads within Plymouth to come before us. And I understand, I'm just giving you a report that, Michelle, you're working on a list, and then we will send out a letter to other people who haven't already appeared from the town, as well as committee heads and other town officials of Plymouth.
Well, I think
With the help of one of our members, Bill Cohan.
you're working on an invite list?
Yes, yep.
Right.
I
Okay.
will provide that. And
But-
I will provide a letter that is super duper clear, that when we invite people in the capacity of a citizen compared to a capacity of an elected or appointed official.
Good, so that's one initiative. Another one that's different, although similar, is that we want to invite outsiders, people not in Plymouth, who are involved in the town governments of some of these charters that we are reviewing that we think are attractive with provisions that make sense. So if you are reviewing a charter where that is the case, if you would get the name of what you think is an individual that could come here and speak to us from that town, that would be very helpful, and give it to Michelle, and we would invite them. For example, if you review the Brookline Charter, who Frank is doing, I believe. Frank has Brookline, and if he finds there's things in the Brookline Charter that make sense, we may want to invite the selectman, the chair of the select board or whatever, or somebody within Brookline to come here. As long as I've been involved in charters, we've talked about some of these towns and no one's ever come. I don't think Brookline's ever been here. We've heard from Braintree and Weymouth in person, and I can't remember whether Framingham ever showed up or not, but there's several towns we've talked about it and they haven't come before us, and I think they should. So that's the second initiative. is to give us names to Michelle of outsiders that should be invited to come and speak on the features of their particular charter that we're interested in. Larry, you had one or two in your charters that sounded good, that you might want to have them come and talk to us. That's number two. Number three is just really a review of our timeline. So as I see it, we will be meeting one more time in August, and then we just have September. And we have meetings in October, but we're going to also be coming up against town meetings, so the fall is going to move relatively quickly. But I think by the end of November and December, we need to start focusing and picking the charters that make the most sense and start taking some decisions and direct our effort. Because we need to get very detailed in the kind of charter that we're going to present. And that's going to take the bulk of the spring and the summer with council's help to actually do the writing and drafting, because we present the report about a year from now. The last thing I want to discuss are our meeting dates.
Mr. Abbott, could I
Yes.
just mention, I thought we had discussed that we were going to try to avoid having the meeting on the same night as COPC.
Well, that's what I'm just coming to now, Russ.
Okay.
Yeah. Betsy?
Yes, one of the things I had recommended earlier that may have gotten lost, I would love to hear from the Charter Commission candidates who were not elected, if they have something in
Yeah,
particular.
right, you meant that before, and that should be the list of the people that Bill Cohen
Oh, good,
and
yeah, you're getting that.
Michelle, because they're
Okay,
local.
thank you.
The other people that ran for the commission had ideas, right. They should be on our list. Now, meeting dates, and this is important, because, let me just say at the outset, I think that the Charter Commission is really quite unique. You know, we were elected by the entire town as the will of the voters for us to get to work and work for a finite period of time and produce a charter within 1 year, which is quite a feat, and do it in public and be televised, and it should be, these meetings should be fully transparent to anybody that wants to watch our proceedings. And they ought to be able to see every single one of our meetings in live TV. At least that's just, I think, and not have to review it on a computer or find it in an archive. Because I think this is really a special commission that should have priority. And that's where, if there's a conflict with an existing committee, then I don't think we should just sort of willingly step aside. That conflict is going to have to be resolved in a way, I think, that carries out what we were elected to do. I think it would be a mistake for this charter to start letting everybody kind of not give us an opening and not be able to televise our meetings. Then we get specific in the conflict. So we have a conflict coming up here on the third Thursday of August with the precinct chairs. And I think of this group, Rustling, you're a member of the precinct chairs. Bill, are you? Is that an issue? Or do you have a vice chair?
Well, you know, I guess, I thought we would discuss,
Well, I'm pointing out the conflict, and then we'll see what we can do about it.
yeah, so there's a conflict, so let's look at the calendar. And so we have, it's the 5th of August.
So we had my proposal for this one,
Right.
Bill,
Yeah.
is that the 19th would have been the meeting,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to just change it. I can't change it. I'm just a member of this commission. I'm just the chair that, fully democratically elected. I don't have the authority unless we all agree to it. So the other possibility that week, if you're willing to accept it, would be to look at the Monday, which is the 16th. And Michelle is checking that out just to see if it's available. Now, I think that Monday may be available because it may be before the planning board moves to Mondays, which I understand they're in the process of doing. So if it's the wish of this board, we'll continue down this road and see if that Monday works. Is that make sense?
Yeah, that works.
If the planning board isn't meeting that Monday, it's my
someone-
understanding that,
I can't make that, but, I'm
Monday?
just one person.
Monday or Thursday.
Yeah, that week is, the third week of the month is always.
And we can't do it Tuesday or Wednesday,
Because of television?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, yeah. And then Thursday's the 19th. How about the following week? Yeah, what about the following week? I know the fourth Monday of the month is Nuclear Matters.
What about the next Thursday?
How about the next Thursday, the 26th? Does that work
Works
for
for
you?
me.
Works for me.
Works for, how about?
That's the fourth Thursday in August.
Fourth Thursday in August works for me.
Does that sound sensible, guys?
You're out of state that week?
Michelle, can we try to,
Could you participate by Zoom? Okay.
Scott, does that work for you?
I'm out of state that whole week at a conference.
But he's,
So you're at a conference that week.
So, I mean, I could try and Zoom, but I don't know what's gonna be.
All right.
tomorrow.
Is that otherwise a sentiment that we'll try to get Thursday, the 26th?
I'll look at the calendar, I don't remember. FinCom may have booked the last Thursday.
The fourth Thursday, that is,
In August.
yeah,
right.
that was the,
I think FinCom has it booked.
so that's another thing. The FinCom has just gone out and booked all these Thursdays.
So,
And they meet on Wednesdays.
Yeah, I
And
think-
they book them
Because
in
Mr.
case they
Canfield
need
has
them.
off.
And I don't, after tonight's,
Michelle, I think we need to take this,
I don't think we're gonna be seeing those meetings anytime soon.
that doesn't seem to make sense, or.
That's how
fair.
that's what has happened,
Right, but I
unless,
think we need to step up here, and maybe somebody's gonna, above us, will have to resolve this one.
yeah, maybe someone might resolve it, because that's our big problem, is that Thursdays in September and October have all been booked by FinCom, but they meet on Wednesday. They have it as a fail-safe measure in case they need to. Yeah, so it's, and we won't know until I asked we had this discussion back in June. I went to the planning department, the finance department, and I asked the finance department, when do they give up those Thursdays? And they goes, yeah, about the night before. So it wouldn't be released to a point where we could adopt it. So I guess we'd have to take a case to the.
Yeah, Michelle, why don't,
Yeah.
why don't we get instructions from what the members here would like us to do, and then you and I can try to see if we can get it to happen. We may have to go higher up the ladder, or whatever. I don't think we should give up all the Thursdays just as
Because,
a,
yeah,
'cause
because
they
at
have
one
one
time, we were,
contingent.
at one time, we were talking about the second and fourth Thursday of the
Right.
month. And then what we ran into was this, loss of those days, so.
all right, so let's start with the 26th of August, which is a Thursday, and see if we can get that one.
Bill, if that doesn't work, would everybody be able to meet from 5 to 7? No, I just trying to think of an
I think it
alternative.
should be also a pretty regular time. I mean, people should be able to just turn on, know it's going to see the Charter Commission, just for a year. All right, so we'll work on that, Michelle. And
But we
then,
know to stay away from the third Thursday of the
Right.
month, that is COPC.
got it.
That's, thank you.
Okay, so that Monday, the 16th, we're not going to consider that unless the 26th doesn't work. Is that all right, Wesley?
That's great.
We'll
Thank
try
you.
the 26th and then
Thank
back to the 16th, okay.
One more
appreciate it.
possible suggestion, what about next week? Do 2 weeks in a row and then not again till September? And next,
Take some time
9, 10, 11, 12.
Bill, what was your comment?
Rather than meet again next
Okay.
week, I think.
Yeah, I
that-
think it's too soon.
So what did, Michelle had a question?
yes, because you just said, Bill, we're gonna try to avoid the third Thursday of
Yes.
every month.
Right.
But I thought,
Well,
We
no, but
want to know about the second and fourth. That's the one.
the second and fourth is the building committee.
second is the building committee. The fourth is generally available.
Now, Rudy and David have
Okay.
that building committee.
The fourth Thursday, then we'd go, what we would have to
Do
do.
the 26th, we're going to try to get that.
Yeah,
So now we're into September.
So you wanna try for the second and fourth Thursday of every month?
No, because the building committee has the second.
I mean, the first and fourth.
that would be
Yes.
that would be a pretty big distance between the two. Does anybody have a problem with that?
No,
2 weeks apart?
But then you'd have.
sometimes it'll be 1 week apart, but they may be 2 weeks apart.
Yeah, 4 and 1 would be better.
Because sometimes you have 5 Thursdays, like July.
Oh. So if we did the first and the fourth, we might end up back to back.
Yes.
I can do back-to-back.
Where do we see in the calendar that happening?
But I think back-to-back is better than having it on
Okay.
a other night at a different time. I mean,
So are
at
you
least-
gonna are you gonna inquire about those Thursdays that have been,
Well, I was told we were,
we already
in
really,
September, we have a second in place. So we're double booked on the first and third Thursday in September.
Are we going to have a conflict with COPC on the third Thursday?
I don't think
They
we should
give it
piss
up
off Mr.
ourselves.
Canty anymore.
If they don't,
If they don't, we don't get it.
this is on the 19th
You
of
know, the
August.
19th we have.
Yeah.
We have the room. The 19th conflict is strictly with the Zoom presentation.
Correct.
Through PAC TV.
Yeah,
So we are in this room.
on the 19th.
COPC meets virtual.
But Bill, we don't want it, we want to be televised live.
They want to be televised live.
Okay, okay,
That's the conflict.
That's the
okay,
issue.
all right, got it. Sorry, got it. Okay, so you're gonna look into those dates.
So,
So,
to the 26th.
Michelle, I think the consensus is that for the next meeting in August, we're going to try to do the 26th. And if the 26th doesn't work, we go back and try the 16th,
Okay?
which is the Monday of the month.
Right.
And then so we got two options. The 19th, because of COPC, isn't going to work. So then so that's August. Then we get into September, and we're going to try to do the 1st and 4th, did we say? Thursdays?
September, we booked 2 Mondays.
But the Mondays are going to be
But
planning board.
The Mondays may not work.
Right. So I'm looking at different dates in September.
Thursdays we can't because the FinComs took them all.
Well, that's the one we're going to have to,
Thursday booked
So-
and
I think we
Tuesdays and
need
Wednesdays
to
are
not
off.
accept that and see what we can do to change it, at least. All we
But
need is-
there might be a little light at the end of the tunnel, because I did have a conversation, and there is talk about setting up some policy of using 1820
But we also want to be
as meeting
televised.
space.
Televised
And they can
live.
televise from there. They have cameras there.
But they can only do one meeting.
Oh.
I mean, they can't do the FinCom televised.
So they only can do one, the PAC television only has one
Live
webinar.
TV,
One live.
One live, and one webinar.
right. So I think we should be trying to get live TV for our meetings.
Well, you do need live if you're gonna do a webinar, so people can call in, you know.
Right, but we should be the one that's on the air at night, whether it's Zoom or webinar.
Okay.
Michelle, do you feel you have enough to work on at this point? Okay. But are you all of a agreement that we should press our position as the Charter Commission? I don't think we should, be the one that has to step aside, because we have this work that's got to get done.
We're
I
gonna
think it
press,
should be done on live TV.
yeah, we're gonna press it, with those Thursdays that
Pardon me?
have been, we're gonna press that with the Thursdays that have been, reserved for FinCom when they're not meeting.
Very good. I think we know where we're headed. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. One more piece of business. The website is well underway. Michelle is working on it, so there'll be a link from the Charter Commission on the town website to a very, hopefully, an interactive website that we can be proud of, with links to videos and our meetings, tapes, and all those things. Right.
I'm no web designer, I'll tell you that, but
Yep.
fighting through it and
Right.
making changes every week to it.
So the next item of the minutes of July 1st, there are 2 sets of minutes, and I think that's about it. So we had the minutes of July 1st. Were there any corrections? I had one correction on page 2, which was a comment that said, could COPC take more control of following articles, more closing? It should be more closely, I think, closely instead of closing on page 2 of the July 1 minutes. In the comment that I made. Are there any other corrections in the July 1 minutes?
July 1 minutes.
Right.
You're looking at, there's 2 minutes, June and July.
Yeah, we had July 1, and the next set was July 15th, I think.
What was that? Where is July 1?
They're in your
It
packet.
says July 15th, but it's July 1. If you look at the upper right corner, it says minutes
See,
from
that's,
July 1st.
that has to be fixed, too. There are 2 sets of minutes. There's a set of July 1 minutes and a set of July 15th minutes, although the July 15 minutes has the wrong little reference in the right corner. So the motion I'm looking for is approval as corrected of the July 1 minutes. So Larry moves it, seconded?
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? July 1 minutes, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No
wouldn't
opposed? So July 1 minutes are accepted.
I wasn't there, so I have to recuse myself.
Oh, you weren't there? But it says you weren't there. That's
Right.
correct, right. Yep, so you abstained because you're not there.
I'm abstaining.
So the July 15th minutes are next.
Motion to approve?
I had two corrections. One was the little annotation in the right corner. It should say July 15 instead of July 1, up at the top of each page. And a comment on page 2, which had to do with the vote count. I said, I have a concern with Mr. Canny's comment on vote turnout. This says a high election turnout could mean that voters are not happy and so forth. I think I said a low turnout would mean the voters are not happy, but it could
Could be
also
either
mean
way.
that they are happy with the way government is running. So that reference really refers to a low turnout, not a high turnout.
I
No.
think you meant that when a lot of people voted, showed up, it's because they were unhappy. So I think what you really meant was,
Actually, I think the point of that comment is it could be either way, and you don't know which way the people really feel.
oh, I see, okay.
Okay.
This is a correction I would make to the July 15th. I was actually there, came in late, right off the plane, and came in. So it doesn't have me as absent, it doesn't have me as there either.
Oh, okay. I think
Yeah,
Frank,
but you were still jet lagged, so you're kind of happier.
Frank should be shown as present. So Michelle, I think that, let's make two corrections. One is the date, and one is Frank Mann's being present.
I would motion with the accepted changes.
Is it seconded? Seconded? So all in favor of the July 15th minutes as corrected, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? July 15th minutes are done. Is there any old business, any new business? So a motion would be in order to adjourn.
Motion to close.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.